everyone, and welcome to the March 14th, 2023 board meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Okay, we're in order. Okay, at this point, I have to catch up with myself. At this point, oh, it's the flag salute. Mr. Gleason, Dr. Gleason, since it's your birthday, it's Dr. Gleason's birthday today. Will you please lead us in the flag salute?
It would be an honor. Please stand. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I do have a report out of closed session. In closed session, the board voted by a margin of 5-0, majority vote. We instructed the district council to settle the matter of regarding Jules Lab, Inc., marketing, sales, practices, and products, liability, litigation, federal district court for the Northern District of California, case number 319-MD-02913-WHO as against Jules Labs, Inc. and its founders, directors, and board members up to the stipulated amount. I also want to share that LVUSD joined this mass action lawsuit at no cost for LVUSD to be named as one of the plaintiffs. With that, may I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Student, do you approve of tonight's agenda?
Yes.
Thank you. Board, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes of February 28th.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Terrific. School board member, do you approve the minutes?
Yes.
Board, all those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Okay, at this point we go to staff board communication. Dr. Stefanowski.
Madam President, members of the board, a couple slides for you all tonight. First up, we are obviously continuing our safety training for our schools. This is Sergeant Bellick from Lost Hills Sheriff Department Station. He heads up the J team for us, by the way. You can tell that obviously the training was held here in the district office. So we're doing site-specific training. Sergeant Bellick is going out to every school, walking through all parts of our schools. So we held a all-hands meeting here in the boardroom where we went over active shooter, safety issues with Sergeant Bellick. He was terrific. Then he walked the building and spent time with each department in their specific office space to explore, examine it, and talk them through, different sorts of scenarios. We don't want to ever think about this sort of stuff, but as adults, we have to, and you want to have a plan. And so he'll be out at all of our school sites as well the rest of the spring and fortifying our plannings and trainings and drills for the next school year as well. So we appreciate the partnership with Lost Hills Sheriff Department. Next up. This is a fun one. A.E. Wright, I believe we have a board member's child in some of these photos. A.E. Wright just placed first in the Odyssey of the Mind competitions. This is a competition that I didn't know much about. Started in the 70s at Rowan University. So been going for 40 years, emphasizes in creativity, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So A. Wright has two teams. We placed first at this competition, I believe it was at Westlake High School. And they have advanced to states. States will occur on April 1st at Moreno Valley High School, I believe.
Both teams played first.
Wow.
Team members, and I apologize if I say these wrong, Ianka Nedeku, Emma Lawrence, Kate Baum, Skylar Hill, Sydney Borslig, Annabelle Miller, Olivia Stilwell were on one of the teams. And the second team was Jade Brawl, Jacob Mizrahi, Mila Prince, Summer Zedner, Matilda Hensley, Aurora Vukovitz. Those are our two teams. Both teams, and this is from the teacher coach, Haley Tepper, so we appreciate her time and energy in this. Both teams competed in their respective categories, which required them to create long-term solutions to a problem. They had a budget of $135, time limit of 8 minutes. They are not allowed to have any adult involvement at all. They're very strict about this rule. It's just a student-led, directed, performed task. The first team had to create a Greek story based on the Iliad with various requirements. One character had to be a statue. One, they had to have a chorus that they sang 3 times. Another team member had to create a dramatic presentation about the most dramatic scene ever. And they had to have a character that overreacted 3 times. You can tell this was rather dramatic.
Guess which one overreacted?
There were 20 different requirements. In total, they're judged on and have to be, so they're judged on the 20 criteria, and they also have to do a spontaneous challenge where they don't know the challenge ahead of time. It's like a minute to win it kind of style challenge. This is an elective class at ARED open to all students, but both teams happen and consist of only GATE students, but any student at ARED is welcome to join it. Ms. Tepper shared she loves this type of problem solving, creative competitions, and it does attract and unlocks our gifted minds and creativity. She said it's been so fun to watch them prepare for months and months and months and see their hard work and dedication pay off. Congratulations.
That's fantastic. That is wonderful. Congratulations, Mr. Lawrence.
Yeah, I would just add, because I think we always say that teachers do more than the classroom time. But this was a great example. This was, Ms. Tepper had to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning to secure the space, had to like hold down the tables, were there until 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. And it's just, I know there's 100 examples of this happening every week in the district, but I think it's good to call it. This kind of stuff is just, it's almost table stakes here, but we shouldn't take it for granted that we have an amazing teacher like that who was so passionate about this that she's willing to kill her entire weekend with the kids to do it. And was, I think, as excited, if not more than the kids, as they went through it, and that they really fed off her. So it was,
Where did other teams come from?
go ahead. I think the farthest south was like a little bit south of LA, maybe not quite San Diego.
Yeah.
And then the farthest north, I want to say, was past Oxnard up there. But I was surprised how huge this is. There's like the whole campus to take it over. The Westlake team, the team at Westlake has been together doing this for 8 consecutive years. The team has stayed together as they move forward and gone up and up and up.
Wow.
So it's really cool.
I think there's 4 or 5 regions in LA. And so both teams took first place in our region, but I don't know how.
Are they all middle school?
There is a high school version. I don't know.
Okay.
I think there's a high school and college version since it started at Rowan University.
But the state finals are in 2 weeks.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Next slide. And again, spending some time on our talented students. We have the Little Mermaid coming up at Agora, that's March 22nd, 25th, and Sing in the Rain in Calabasas, March 21st, 25th. It is phenomenal. They are phenomenal. Family friendly. Bring the little ones, bring your neighbors. Come on, great stuff. Tickets available right now, and they're on www.pax.org. Next slide, Jim. And this Friday, we have one of my favorite events every year, the 13th annual Elton Gold's MVP baseball game. That's where our varsity baseball, our baseball students at Agora partner up with students with special needs. It'll be this Friday, 1:45 p.m. at the Agora Stadium. The band is there, the cheer is there, students are there. It's just a rocking event. Next slide. That concludes staff communication. There is one more slide, Jim, can you refresh? We had a special appearance today at Bay Laurel. We had Smokey Robinson join the students at Bay Laurel today. It was so much fun. Ms. Cutbill and I were there together. I think we've got 2 pictures there, yep. Picture before the event, Smokey's in between myself and Dr. Duncan. He was a wonderful, wonderful speaker. Obviously, he's beyond talented. The students at Bay Laurel were phenomenal. Dr. Duncan had a great program schedule. Each grade asked a question. They went up to the microphone and asked directly to Smokey. He replied. He was so kind, really wise, shared his experiences growing up in a segregated country, how the music impacted various communities when he was a child, what it was like to be a young child in a segregated Detroit. Really just a very, very powerful message, clearly a kind soul and very talented person, so we appreciate him spending time with students available this morning.
The kids have been doing Motown all through Black History Month in their music classes with Josh Barrell. And he said every time he'd play something new for them, they were like, we want more. Like, they loved the music. I love that the music holds up. But he wrote so many of other people's songs, like the Temptations songs. And the kids knew the music, and they showed a short film on Motown. And how it started in segregation back then. And it was just the kids were phenomenal, as they always are.
Cabinet got to learn a lot about Smoky Day also. It was exciting. Dr. Severs joined us as well. And
Yes.
big fan of Smokies. More fan after today. That concludes staff communication.
Okay, Ms. Richardson.
I have to say I'm a little ill-prepared because I didn't know I was going to be up here, so I don't have anything to report for Calabasas, but in regards to Aurora High School, we had our spring formal dance, which went very well. This week is ASB election week, so we are currently in the process. I think voting starts tomorrow for new ASB board rep will be elected, so yeah, things like that. I know we have Song for Charlie coming this week for the assembly, and so we're getting prepared for that. And I think everything was kind of covered in the software communications. So that's all I have.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
How many students, so is this for all the ASB positions?
so it's-
And how many
It's going to be
go up?
for ASB president, vice president, board representative, and then all the like class positions. There's 2 people running for ASB board representative. There's 3 for president, 3 for vice president. It's very competitive this year,
wow.
which is good
Yeah.
because it means that it brings out the best of
Yeah.
people. So yeah, it's exciting.
Oh, okay, that's great.
Mrs. Gaines.
This morning I attended the Calabasas Chamber of Education Committee via Zoom.
Welcome back to that.
Thank you.
And I want to thank them for all of their support. And just a couple of things that were mentioned is, I think it's the first time since the pandemic, they're bringing back the bowling tournament.
I'm having
Which is this
deja vu.
Friday.
I'm having
Which
deja
is
vu.
this Friday, the 24th, and it supports, they give out scholarships
that's
to
very nice.
seniors. So this supports the scholarships.
A week from Friday.
The 24th.
Oh,
Yeah, a
right,
week
okay.
from Friday.
Right,
So next
okay.
Friday.
So Mrs. Gaines, you're going to be back in time to join the board, the bowling?
I will be en route. So if you don't mind, we'll not be able to.
So shoot a couple of it that day.
And Monica Martin was there also, and she talked about the event, which is June 3rd at Sagebrush, and tickets will be on sale.
Very nice, thank you. Mrs. Cutbill.
We had a great first meeting with our new committee of oversight for, it's now Measure G/S. Terrific group of wonderful community members who have stepped forward to be a part of this, and I know we're going to hear more later tonight, but just a great morning sort of going through finances, the bond, and how it will look, their role as we move on. So appreciate Dr. Gleason's tremendous help with that. So.
Thank you. And Mrs. Mendes.
So Mrs. Stein and I were able to go to Calabasas High School's spring concert, and also in attendance at the concert performing were vocal groups from A.E. Wright and A.C. Stell. So we also got to see Dr. Finneran there because she was there to watch her daughter. And it was just really great listening to these great groups, and also the magic of seeing how these feeder schools got to perform on the stage at Calabasas Performing Arts, and encourage them to participate in the music program once they hit a forum. I mean, Calabasas, sorry.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lawrence.
Nothing.
Okay, I'm just going to add that most of it was covered, that like Mrs. Cutbill said, she and I, being on the facilities committee, attended the orientation for the new group of oversight of citizens in our community that are on the new Measure G, Measure S oversight committee, and bond attorney David Casanoka presented, and it was wonderful. Thank you again, as Mrs. Cutbill said, to your leadership, Dr. Gleason. I think the overview of it, I think they had a good orientation. They took notes, and I thank them for taking this seriously, and we're going to get an update in a minute on a report, the annual report. Mrs. Cutbill and I also did a child nutrition tour. We looked at the kitchen facilities at Calabasas High School, A.C. Stell, and Chaparral, and it's very enlightening and interesting to see the facility and how it is used and how small they are. And they're basically at the elementary school like a classroom that's been converted into a very minor, bare bones kitchen to serve students lunch. So again, as a general theme, shout out to our kitchen staff and all of our employees who do a lot under interesting circumstances sometimes with what they have to work with. So thank you for that. Mr. Lawrence and I attended SDC, the Superintendent's Discussion Council meeting last week, and I must tell you, we rotate as board members, and the PFA, PFC presidents are just wonderful, big picture, so supportive, ask great questions, and Ms. Falk gave a great overview. We're going to hear more tonight about our attendance, truancy, and incentives at school sites that we're going to start as we get out of COVID and we get back to quote unquote normal and learn about why it's good for kids to be in school, in their classrooms. So with that, I will end staff board communication. This is the time for speaker cards, seeing none. We're actually going to move right into information items. We're going to take those first. So up first, Dr. Stepanowski is the annual report on Measure G, Measure S oversight from the Oversight Committee.
Madam President, members of the board, as the board's aware, Measure G was a $128 million bond passed in 2006 by the voters of Virgenes. We are coming to the end of those funds. I think there's maybe $48,000 left in Measure G. And fortunately, by the generous support of our community, we passed Measure S. So this committee will be transitioning, as has been mentioned by two board members tonight, from G to S. Tonight, I think we have one of our members of the committee, Ms. Lisa Simpson, here to present under challenging microphone circumstance. Dr. Lisa.
Madam President, members of the board, we mentioned yesterday, excuse me, is that yesterday? Wow.
I know.
Yesterday we had our inaugural Measure GS Citizens Oversight Committee, which seated and provided orientation for the inaugural Measure G and S committee. We're very lucky to have Ms. Lisa Simpson here tonight. Ms. Lisa Simpson has been the parent volunteer on the prior Measure G committee, then reapplied for the Measure G and S committee, and was selected. Mrs. Simpson specializes in K-12 communications and networking, and has served 2 terms on Measure G, and because the Measure G and S bylaws reset the term limits, she is looking
We're
for
never letting her go, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. As the board knows very well, the Citizens Oversight Committee is a very important mechanism to provide fiscal oversight of our spending, and we, of course, take that process very seriously. Mrs. Simpson is here tonight just to speak, of course, to Measure G, as we had used the remainder, pretty close to the remainder of those funds. The committee has received the audit report, and Ms. Simpson is here to provide an update on that. So, without further ado, we'd love to welcome. Is the microphone at the podium also challenged?
Okay.
Oh, that one works.
All right, it does work. All right, good evening, Madam President and the board. I am Lisa Simpson. I'm here to give you a quick review. I understand I was not the chairman of our committee, so I know that the way that we present this to you is done in different ways. One could be just simply reading the report to you, which I'm not going to do. That doesn't sound very fun for any of us, frankly. So I'm just going to give you a quick review. I think you're probably very familiar. Measure G, the committee was initially voted in 2006. So for those of you that have been on the board for a while, I'm sure you've heard these reports every year since then. Not really a whole lot different to report, but just to say that this is the last report from the last time you'll hear of Measure G. Is Ryan said that it's moving to, happy birthday by the way,
Thank you.
that it's moving to a Measure G/S committee. So, so that establishment was done. You guys voted in the new committee on your last board meeting, and I am sliding over it and apparently never going away. So that part, that piece is completed. And as was mentioned, the Measure G Oversight Committee is an oversight committee, meaning that we don't advise, we basically just review. And we have very strict bylaws as stated by the California State Constitution, so we follow those bylaws. We review the documentation, the fiscal reports, the activities. We go on site on occasion to see what has occurred. For example, the biggest thing that we did was the multi-purpose room at Lupin Hill. So we got to go through that whole process as part of Measure G. And now there's a number of other activities that we're looking forward to as Measure S comes in. But again, we just review those activities to make sure that the district is doing what they are supposed to do as laid out by the rules through Measure G. In those rules, it's also that we have to hold a minimum of 2 meetings per year. We did last year, at the end of fiscal year, so we conducted our 2 meetings and reviewed all the documentations, and the meeting minutes, our questions, and all the other documentation is publicly available on the website, and our meetings are open and public to anyone who wants to sit in and review what we review as well. So all of that was completed. In addition to that, we had the annual report done by the outside committee. We reviewed the audit by the outside agency and asked questions and went through the whole review process. There were no issues found in the auditor, so that was completed as well. And then just as part of the committee ongoing basis, we continue to just review the overall activities and again have opportunities to go on site to see the different activities as they evolve. Reporting on our duties, again, it's important that we inform the public. That's the biggest thing. Everything's on the website, meetings are open, as I stated. And then our committee's report on the review of the expenditures is just really the final report where we review everything that we spent. And as Dr. S stated, we have about $48,000 left. That is essentially it. So the committee then hereby, and I'm the representative of the committee, just wants to acknowledge to you all that to the best of our knowledge and everything that we reviewed, that the bond proceeds were expended only for the purposes set out by Measure G. They were not used to pay for teacher salaries or any of that, and that the district was in compliance with the requirements as set out by the state Constitution.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
Just thank you for the time you've put in and for being willing to continue to serve. We appreciate it. It is so valuable. It gives us comfort, but accountability and credibility when we tell the community we are doing with the money what we said, and we appreciate that. That's valuable to us.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your time.
Ms. Simpson, I do want to also, will you please, on behalf of the board and the district, thank your committee members, and I'm sure Mr. Gleason, you sent them, or Dr. Gleason, you sent them a letter thanking them at the end, those who did not return. We appreciate it because it is a huge responsibility that you are doing for the entire community. Basically, all we have is trust and credibility, as Mrs. Cutbill said, and thank you for putting the time and the effort in. It means so much to all of us and more so to the community. It's independent oversight. The board does not attend your meetings other than yesterday's orientation, and we really appreciate it. To note, I want to note one thing that as I'm sitting here is Mrs. Gaines was the chairperson of Measure G, and Mrs. Gaines has things come full circle. This is the last report for Measure G.
Yeah,
So,
that's
Only
exciting.
$48,000 left.
yes, can you believe that? So 128.
Getting old.
$128 million bond that you chaired and passed, and here we are. It was invested greatly to support our students, and again, oversight is so important, and we thank you. And we thank you.
That's fantastic. All right, thank you very much.
Drive
Thank you.
safely, stay dry. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simpson.
Okay, and with that, we're going to move on to our next information item, which is home hospital board policy and administrative regulation. Dr. Stepp.
Madam President, members of the board, obviously we from time to time bring CSBA recommendations to the board to update our policies and ARs, and this one is 6183 home hospital instruction that Ms. Falk has been working on. Ms. Falk.
Madam President, members of the board, tonight I bring to you a revision to actually Administrative Regulation 6183. There is no longer a corresponding board policy. And the update, our last update was 2007. So this brings us in alignment with the latest ed code requirements in terms of the requirement of the note and the requirement for the district to serve students who are residing within the district at residential facilities during the period of time they are there.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. At this point, Mrs. Falk, you'll make sure that the board policies are removed from Gamut, and the AR does not need board vote, but it will be uploaded to the Gamut website, so we have all the current ones. Thank you very much. Moving on, we move on to an overview of attendance plans. Dr. Stepanowski.
Madam President, members of the board, as I think I've mentioned a few times, we're headed on the back to the basics approach, coming out and heading into very much more normal times. And of course, a big part of that is a focus on the academic achievement of our students. And one-to-one correlation, direct correlation of that is, of course, student time in a classroom with their teacher. Nothing is a greater indication of student academic performance and achievement than being in the classroom with their teacher. The state has, I think we've discussed in previous meetings and committees, the state is struggling, the country is struggling with this entire issue. The chronic absenteeism rate for the state of California is 30%. Our district's is, from my perspective, I think it would be shared by everyone in the room, too high, and I believe we're at just a little over 18% chronic absenteeism, which is defined as 18 or more days of being absent from school for any reason. Illness, vacation, God forbid, bereavement, any of those kind of things. The state is agnostic on to the reasons. They simply count it as an absence. And so one of the things I've tasked Assistant Superintendent Falk with is dialing in on this problem, gathering data for us, and coming up with a plan to address it as we, again, embrace the normal times and the challenges we used to have, and we do appreciate having again. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here, but it will take some time, take some shifting of some mindsets, right? There's still some fear out there, but we really want the little ones in our classrooms working hard. Ms. Falk.
Thank you, Dr. Stepanowski. Madam President, members of the board, as Dr. Stepanowski said, he tasked me with the job of really doing a deep dive into the chronic absenteeism, where we're experiencing it, and how to tackle it. So the first thing I did was run an areas query to get a baseline of where we were in February of 2023. And the baseline was 14 or more absences, and as Dr. Stepanowski said, that's excused, unexcused, all absences are counted. Because 14 puts a student on track to 18, basically 2 every month. And like I said, 18 or more absences in a year results in a student being labeled as chronic absenteeism. Jim, next slide. So here's the numbers in total by each side. A total of 996 students as of February 2023 were considered to be chronically absent or on the path to be chronically absent if they're at 14 right now. And that's the numbers by site, looking at elementary, middle, high school, and then of course Mariposa is unique since it's a K-8 through school. Go ahead, next one. And then I did a deep dive a little bit. President Stein asked me to kind of do a little bit more deep dive into the numbers. I was able to get through Agora and Calabasas because those were the highest numbers, the biggest number in terms of the impact of students. So if you look at, I broke it up by grade point. So basically 42% of the students still are maintaining between a 4.0 and a 3.0. But when you look at the below 2.0, roughly 20% of our students who are chronically absent are having GPAs at 2.0 or below. And when you look at the numbers even more closely, 32% of the students out of Aurora High School who are chronically absent are considered low SES. 31%.
Low SES means.
Low socioeconomic.
31% are identified as special education, 16% of the students are on 504s, and 22% of those students out of Aurora High School who are chronically absent or on the path of being chronically absent are permanent kids. And then I have the same numbers for Calabasas.
Okay, but Mrs. Falk, do you have, or have you looked at, because I doubt you have it here, is comparison to prior to COVID numbers? These numbers comparison?
Yeah, not by subgroup.
Okay.
Not by
okay.
subgroup, no.
What's our contract, in big air quotes, what's our contractual arrangement with permanent students who are coming in? Don't we have basically, aren't we saying you are required to be here and chronic absenteeism is a cause for removal of your permit?
It is, yes, but it isn't as simple as that, because one of the caveats to what the state does versus what we kind of do is the state counts all absences, no matter why you're absent, as being chronically absent. So kids who are truant, and in other words, like we don't know why they're not coming to school, are different permit-wise than kids who may be sick, have excused, have surgeries, are out. And so we have to look at that as a school district in terms of permit, but no matter what the reason, the state looks at it as a chronic absenteeism. So it's not as simple as saying those 22% are violating their conditions of their permit, because it wouldn't be an accurate statement. And then the Calabasas numbers, Jim. Calabasas is very similar. If you look at that, 52% of their students are 4.0 between 3.0. Roughly 15% of their students are at the below 2.0. 27% of those students are low SES, 10% are special education, 12%, and roughly the same percentage in permit is 22%. So, as you can imagine, there's 996 students. My plan is to deep dive all of those schools and provide the schools with these statistics, but for the limited time that I had, I chose the two highest schools, and obviously the impact of high school kids not coming is greater in some respect in terms of credit and graduation.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that that's our first area that we're looking at.
Do you have would it be would it be fair to guess that maybe the 4.0 to 3.5, 52 are largely weighted to senior classes, seniors?
My guess would be yes, that's
Yeah.
another area that I'm looking at. There is a large number of seniors
Yeah.
in general that are on the chronic.
Overall, so
Yes.
seniors
Correct.
are disproportionately over-indexing.
It appears that way. I
Senior
say that
is a real
statistically,
thing.
but
Yeah,
yes,
that's
it appears that way.
It is
Yes.
It's real.
And you're also going to then be looking, like you said, at breakdown by grade, and if they're senior, or all of them, but especially seniors, because they're graduating in a couple months, basically, is to make sure they're meeting those graduation requirements.
Right. And obviously the bigger concern are the kids who are 2.0 below,
Yeah.
who are
Right.
also not coming
Exactly.
to school.
And that's, right, that's across the board.
Right.
Okay.
Jim, next
Yes,
slide.
my son had senioritis.
Is it okay if I ask?
Yeah.
Yes,
So for the low socioeconomic status, is there like a way to see what, because I feel I'm more worried about that than
Yes.
someone who has a 4.0 GPA. Because
Exactly.
what's driving that kid to not come to school? Is it because of bullying? Is it because they're hungry, like they can't get to school, which is like, to me, that's like even worse than, some seniors skipping school. So is there a way to like, I don't really know like how you would like.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
And yes, there is a way, and that's part of the
Yeah.
next part of this, is once we've identified those students, then what is the triage, so to speak, in order to address that? So great question. And hopefully when I finish this, I will have answered that. So there's a 3-tiered approach that we're looking at for the kids who appear on that list. And I might add, I'm going to run this at the end of every month. So the next data point will be the end of March to see which students have dropped off. Hopefully some of those kids who are 14 have dropped off because the next criteria is going to be 16.
Right.
And some of those kids who are already chronically absent, we're looking to see not an increase. If you're already at 18, you're chronically absent, but we don't want to see you jump to 22, 24.
Exactly. Okay.
So can I ask one of my questions right now, since you brought that up? One of my questions, I have a few. One of my questions is, so at what point are you going to do this? Obviously, you're starting now, you're going to look at it for the month, but now as we move into the fall, we don't want to be looking at this again in March. So in the fall, are schools going to be looking at this monthly, at the 5-week? I mean, this cries out exactly what Ms. Richardson was saying, early intervention. We need to know why kids are not coming to school. The longer they stay home, the worse it is that, you feel so insecure, right? Going back, we've all been there, right?
I think it
So-
gets worse once you miss more school.
Exactly.
Why?
And we need
It
to know
becomes a
why
yes,
at all levels. So at all levels, so that's one of my questions.
Okay.
Are you going to be looking at
She's got a slide.
So the first thing is, the overall answer is yes. And through this 3-tiered process, we will have identified all those. So the first thing is just the general blast, sending out to all parents through the principal that attendance matters. You have to be in school. Statistics are very clear on kids who are chronically absent. Statistically do not do well in high school and beyond high school. Those statistics are well established. So we're going to have principals, and we've already started this process of identifying the individual students who are on their chronic absenteeism list. The principals are sending individualized letters to those families and reaching out with a phone call by either the principal, a wellness counselor, or a counselor, or the school psychologist. There will be a personal contact with every one of those families
By when? What is the goal to have that?
by March 30th.
Okay.
Of this year. And then we're also ordering mesh banners at every site to put around, just so when families drive up, that reminder of, hey, attendance matters, attendance counts, we need your kids to be at school.
Yeah.
At the beginning of every year, principals are going to reinforce that in their message they send out at the beginning of the year to all families. You know, attendance is important, and we want you here. With the PFCs and the principals and the staff as a whole, what incentives can they develop at their school site to entice kids to come to school? In other words, what you said is accurate. The more you're out, the harder it is sometimes to come back. So we need to incentivize and reward those kids who are coming. So it's going to be kind of a 2-tiered approach. And then we're going to do a district-wide acknowledgement of the school that has the highest percentage of attendance and the school that has the most improved attendance.
Yes.
So a school who's identified right now as having really high chronic absenteeism can improve and still be recognized by the district. So that's the Tier 1 approach. The next line. The Tier 2 approach is when I run the list again, those kids who either continue to be chronically absent are going to be a Tier 2 approach. The kids who appear on the list will start at that Tier 1 approach.
Okay.
So Tier 2 is going to involve parent trainings, actually more generic parent trainings at the school site. Come, we'll help support you, reaching out to those families. How can we support you to get your kid to school? Is it because you don't have transportation? Is it because you just don't have the skills, or you may need some support in those areas? And that happens.
Yeah.
Also including the wellness counselors and the behaviorists, because some of this is school avoidance. And I treat it as school avoidance in terms of how we're going to approach it, as in we would any avoidant behavior. How can we programmatically and systematically support parents and help the student? That's all in a Tier 2 approach. And then the final approach, the Tier 3, is we're looking at those students who, despite Tier 1, Jim, the next slide, and Tier 2 approaches, are not seeing improvement. Then we're going to do some home visits. We're going to go in, we're going to support the family. What can we do to help you? Set up some programmatic systems and provide some individual training and support to families who need and request that type of support. And then next slide, Jim.
So what are we doing for, okay, so I'm here. So what are we doing as far as, no, I'm reading what Jim.
Is there a question?
No, yeah, what are we doing as far as is communicating with teachers? I mean, we need to change the culture, not just with parents. So we heard loud and clear at SDC on Friday, and you were there, that, you know, and teachers, I get it. Nobody wants to catch a cold or COVID or the flu from anyone, right? So you have a classroom full of students. But, you know, some teachers, I think, from what we're hearing, are still emailing home, if you have the sniffles, don't come back to school. So what kind of outreach is going to be done for teachers, all the staff at a school?
So the state of California, as you know, ended their COVID emergency. We're waiting for LA County to officially do that. They did send out some guidance, but it looks like March 31st is when that drop dead date is going to be. And Dr. Stepan, I think you can talk about this also. You know, we will be sending out district-wide messages in terms of to parents and staff that we're going back to our pre-COVID guidelines in terms of when you should or should not send your child to school. A fever over 100. All those pre-COVID things that we did 3 years ago, we're going back to those and reminding everybody, teachers, staff, parents. This is, you know, we're back to business as usual. So if your child has the sniffles, but they're not running a fever, and they're not vomiting, and they're not otherwise sick, you send your kid to school.
Yeah, because my concern is that if there's conflicting messages, right? That's the concern.
So we do realize that.
So the piece that, I think this is all great, the piece that I didn't see that I think we might want to suggest is, we made it kind of clear that when there's an important message, there's a video from Dan Stefanowski that comes to families. And I think this is important enough where we might want to think about having a video message that comes to you that says, we are resetting, and you as a parent with a kid in school, this is what this means. If your kid's got sniffles, they go to school. If he has a fever, they don't. Like, I think what we heard from the parents, and I've certainly felt it, is there are two different groups hitting you with peer pressure.
Right.
There are some campuses where it's the teachers and staff, but there's also some parents who are like, oh my God, I cannot believe you sent your kid to school with a cough. Especially in the some of the more high performing.
And all that is against the backdrop of virtual learning,
Made
made it easy. It created that, there's no longer that tension about not being at school. There's so many things going on here. And, I used to hate the perfect attendance award that they used to give out years ago at Lindero. I used to call it just call it the I sent my kid to school sick so you could all be sick award.
Tylenol award.
So we're not looking for perfect attendance.
Correct.
But we're also not looking to lose $2 million to our general fund because our absenteeism is off the charts. I think the most shocking thing for me was that all of our elementaries, all of them, qualified to be California Distinguished Schools, but the chronic absenteeism is what kept them all but one out. That's,
The state set a 10% threshold for that, and they all blew through that except Chaparral, and Chaparral was in the medium level. It wasn't even low, medium,
Yeah.
7+% growth.
Yeah, we have one medium school, so we do need to course correct here, and I think there's a lot of different things going on, and kids, obviously there's some that can do well with chronic absenteeism. It's not most, it's not by a long way.
Well, as we saw in I think it was our meeting, we're seeing some precipitous declines in scoring and testing.
Yeah,
Particularly in math and others, that we know is a direct correlation to if you miss 10% of your in-class instruction time, which 18 days is, 18 days is 10% of your day, of your year with us, it's just not humanly possible for most kids to achieve at the level they can. So I feel like that message is one that, Dan, if you're able to do, but I feel like that needs, the budget, the $2 million is important, but I think the one that's gonna move someone is gonna say, wow, 10%, you're right, because I bet you when you reach out to the absentees parents, they're gonna be shocked to learn how many days they've been absent. They're not gonna realize that they've missed 10% of the school. They'll be like, 15 days, how'd that happen? It was 1 day this week, 2 days that week, because it's just easy, as Ms. Gutfeld said.
I think we want to stop the idea that it's easy. I do appreciate that you're the school avoidance. I worry about kids who have missed some, and then it becomes a downward spiral. Then they're like, I'm not going to get back on a footing, I just don't know what to do. I've seen that happen, and so there's so many different things here. I appreciate you taking this on, because there's different reasons, there's different solutions that, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I am also. It's a learning curve for everybody. There was a period of time where children were told to stay home, and now we have parents working from home.
Right.
And it's a different message. Like when our kids went through school, excused absences weren't counted.
Right.
And now they are. So it's just helping parents understand. I think what Mr. Lawrence said is accurate. I don't think parents really realize if you miss 2 days, 1 day, 3 day, how that adds up. And it's just a reset. Everybody's going through it across the whole country.
Yeah. So, okay.
And like you said, even the private sector, right? They're looking to
Absolutely.
incentivize employees coming back to work.
So there's the timelines. This will be between now and June 30th, or really June 14th, or whatever the last day of school is. I think it's the 14th. So I've already started the process of meeting with every site admin, giving them their list of individual students who are on their chronic absenteeism list, and asking them with their site and with their PFC to come up with a site-based plan with incentives that they will share with me and Janet, or Kim and I, in terms of, making sure that everybody's on equal footing in terms of one school isn't doing something very extravagant, and another school isn't. All within reason, but some variations are fine with that.
Sure.
And Ms. Funk, I'm sure, you're gonna get the message out, we don't want it to be punitive. We want it to be incentive, positive,
Correct.
not punitive. So we wanna get that message across as well.
So, Sort of.
Yeah, sort of.
So, the challenge becomes in any environment where you have something for a couple of years, it becomes an entitlement. And you feel like, so now we're really trying to change behavior in a significant way. And we're not really providing any carrots that are worthwhile to the person who's enjoying going to Disneyland for 3 days. So at some point, we may have to discuss, like, what is the stick approach?
Yes.
What is the approach that says, if you miss more than 14 days, you don't get to have your sports are
I
off.
think there are some high school ideas that you mentioned in finance committee.
At my school, you lose your off-campus pass if you
Right.
are absent for, or
But-
like a D or an F.
But I think we suspended off-campus passes entirely anyways, right
No,
now.
we didn't.
For,
No,
for,
no.
for,
We're talking about for lunch.
I thought you had mentioned that we were no longer doing off-campus SDC if it's for attendance, because we paused that during COVID.
I paused that to begin the school year,
Okay.
but I greenlit the high schools to re-implement the attendance piece for next year. So, but the grades right now, tardies, those sorts of things
Is that
are part
happening?
of
Are
it.
you hearing about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're absent for more than 3 days in the semester at my school, you don't get your off-campus pass. That's what.
Are you hearing of people of that happening? Yeah.
Yeah, people are losing their.
That was actually the numbers we discussed. My understanding was we didn't implement it, but the high schools are ready to implement it. They want to.
Let's do it.
And when I say punitive, I'm talking about hardships. I'm talking about real school refusal, emotional hardships, single parents, struggle, that's what
I'm talking about loss of privilege.
I know,
Yes,
you're
I am
talking
too.
about, right,
So
different.
here's how I kind of look at it, just in the scope of everything I've ever done in terms of this kind of behavior. There's a core group that you will contact the parents, their kids will come to school.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen, it's just the nature of it. Then there's gonna be that middle group who's gonna need a little bit more support, but will come. The hardest group is always that core group, and it's a very small percentage, thankfully, that it is most of the older kids whose parents are not able to get them out of class. You can take your little child and put your child in a car and drive them to school. You can't do that with older kids.
Now, we used to have a difference, and it used to be in the legal handbook, that we differentiated between a excused and unexcused. And the difference was, an unexcused, the teacher did not have to let you make up the work.
It is
So,
teacher discretion.
I had a son who was gone out of state all the time playing AAA hockey in high school. And he had some teachers who were fine with letting him make up the work because he was traveling for his sport, and some that weren't because they said it was unexcused. Sometimes the excused, unexcused came at the view of the person in the attendance office, and this is my middle school, high school experience, of what they felt about that. Like, you were in Canada playing hockey, I'm sorry, that doesn't count. Even if, do you know what I mean? Sometimes it was like, okay, that's fine, you've been gone 2 Fridays this month, but you'll make up the work. Some teachers were so I always struggled with that excused versus unexcused.
And that is true in terms of.
And I know the state just considers it
Correct.
gone.
But again, I don't think just doing a short deep dive into what I don't think that's the issue.
Yeah.
We're gonna always have families like that, we always have, and
Yeah.
you know what, if your child's in a competitive sport and they're doing a dance thing, you're gonna do that. What we're really targeting in this
Yeah.
is those COVID kids who are just not coming to school because either they've lost the incentive, they need some more structure and support, the family maybe needs some more structure and support, and welcoming these kids back on campus. Like not walking on campus and somebody saying to you, why have you been absent 21 days? But turning it into more, we're glad to see you back, what can we do to support
Yes.
you? That's the kind of, and then we'll capture those kids.
Yeah.
And that's an important message to give.
I think you're gonna find once the word is Johnny or Susie have a cold, they go to school, and that's the expectation, you're gonna see a lot of parents start to send their kids back when they have the top cover, because I don't wanna keep them home. So, I mean, I'm thrilled to send, I'm thrilled to send them to school.
That's why I pay my property
Yeah.
taxes. So you take these people.
But we don't, because there's this cultural expectation right now that you don't do that.
And I think that's shown the lower levels,
Yeah.
less so at the high school.
I do think clarity on sniffles can go,
Yeah.
fever, no. Like,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
clarity on symptoms
Great.
will be helpful.
And,
Think about a video. I think you guys should really think about a video. Those are digested, they're shared on social well, people engage, parents watch that stuff.
Dana, Dr. Stepanowski and myself had already decided on a message, just not the format of it, so.
Okay.
Also, like I said, we're gonna provide banners, and site admins are gonna be meeting with families and students, depending on the age level, who are chronically absent, so what can we do, to get you here when you're here, how can we support you? That'll all happen between March and June. And I think that's the last slide, Jen.
Ms. Richardson, did you have something you wanted
Oh,
to say?
Yeah, I think like there will be some kids who you won't be able to it's just like burnout is very real. Like school is hard, and when you do it for 4 years, like there comes a point, especially like I'm not surprised to see that there's a high number of the high achieving students who are chronically absent, because when you push yourself so hard for 4 years and then it's like you get to senior year and you're like, oh, I'm leaving. So I think
And 2 of those years were COVID.
yeah, and I think it's I think it's going into it, you have to be prepared that you may not be able to fix that, and I don't know.
The wellness
It's
counselors
it's
will
such
be key.
such a culture thing that it definitely won't be able to be fixed this year. It's kind of something that has to be throughout the years, because I do think sickness is a part of it, but also at my school, people aren't usually absent because they're sick. It's because you're so tired, you're exhausted, that you can't get out of bed.
A whole nother discussion of what we discussed when I was on the board previously of what to do with second semester senior.
Yeah,
There are
that's
alternatives
a whole
to, there are
different
schools that do
monster.
different models,
Yeah.
right? That's a whole,
And that's historically been the case. I mean, what we're in right now is above and beyond, and every state, every school district in all the states are experiencing the same thing. You're not going to eliminate absences. We're not going to eliminate all absences,
Yeah.
but we can improve and get back to where we were
Yeah.
pre-COVID. And really, that's what we're looking at. We have entered an era, as all school districts have, where they need to reset the mindset of we're open, come back, we're here to support you, and you have to be in school. You have to be in school. I'm going to be analyzing monthly data every month, running it, meeting with the principals. Brandy Rosen, who's the coordinator of academic and behavioral interventions, who oversees our behavior program, is going to be working very closely with principals on a weekly basis in terms of how are we supporting, what's going on, because just getting a kid to school isn't enough, especially at the younger
Yes.
ages. We have to help support, we have to
Yeah.
create a village, so to speak, around those kids for a period of time until they still get back in that pattern of coming to school. And so, like I said, we'll be measuring it weekly, monthly. I'll be providing every school with an update, and hopefully, my hope is, when the new year rolls around and this is business as usual, we'll start to see a significant decline.
He stepped away. I was going to ask Dr. Stepp, but you may know the answer to this. When he shared with principals sort of the impact on everything, academics, finances, everything of the chronic absenteeism, were they surprised? Were they already kind of aware?
They were aware. In fact, many principals that I've already met with have had some workings of what to do. I
Yeah,
think the coordinated effort they're very appreciative of, because, when you're on a school site, there's a lot going on for a principal. So, you maybe have this plan and then something happens and you have to do this. With this whole kind
Yeah.
of team approach, then they know they're gonna have the support, so they can pick up the phone and call Brandy and say, hey, can you reach out to this family? I've reached out to them, they've indicated they needed some support, and then we can take it.
especially if they have a sibling at another school.
Correct.
Right.
But at the elementary level, what you were talking about is getting the little ones back, and the extra support for them, and we don't know the family dynamics. And now that we have full-time elementary counselors, is there a piece, that the counselor can be involved in, and making sure that the communication gets to the counselor?
So it's gonna be the principal, Brandy, the wellness counselors, the psychologists, and the school counselors.
Okay.
That's gonna be the core
Great.
team, who's making that personalized contact with the
Great.
family. And like you said, not in a punitive way, hey, help us understand, what can we do to help you to get support to your kid?
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, is that it?
That's it for information.
Okay, any last questions or thoughts? This is really great, Ms. Falk, so good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much so.
Okay, so, and you'll provide updates to us. You can even use your Friday letter to provide updates. We'd love to see movement and see how it's going. And with that, we're gonna move back to, if I can find it, consent, wait, let me find it first. To consent A, if we can have a motion to approve consent A.
I move to approve consent A.
May I have a second?
Can we pull item 5 and discuss it separately, please?
Sure, so may I have a motion to approve items 1 through 4 and 6 through 13?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Is there any questions on any of those?
No, I'm just pleased Mariposa's going to Yosemite. We hope they're open in May.
No, right, right.
We hope they open then.
Mariposa's
Yeah.
20 Yosemite.
They're still closed, yeah.
Does anyone know what AHSB means? I feel like I should know, but I don't.
It's Essential Ellington, I believe.
The band.
Is it? Right.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That was
And then I was curious that item number 7, the approval of the lease agreement for the extra modular unit, I'm assuming that the payment and performance bond is a part of that agreement? That is number.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, part of the change order.
Could you put your microphone a little closer?
Part of the change order.
Okay, with that, let's vote on those items. Student, do you approve of those items?
Yes.
Okay, board, all those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to the facility use fees. May I have a motion to approve? Let's get a motion going.
Yes. Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Ms. Gaines did the motion?
Yes.
Mrs. Cutler did the second? Okay, Mr. Lawrence.
I'd just like someone to walk us through this. I'd like to understand kind of the rationale, the financial impact. The agenda item itself didn't have a whole lot of like, it just talked about 3% increases, but I'm trying to get a sense for, so maybe just walk me through it broadly.
Right. I will turn over to Dr. Gleason. Basically, we haven't upped them in a long time and we're way out of whack, so, on a number, just on some areas. So, Dr. Gleason.
Yeah, so we did a study of all comparable facilities in Ventura County and looked at nonprofit and commercial rates. As we looked at the surrounding districts and to inform this fee structure, we took the higher of our existing rate or the average of the Ventura County market rate. And in many cases, it was $20, $30, $40 more for our pools as an example, for some fields as an example. So, and then the other significant change on facility use is that it used to say 3% increase per year. We now have a greater of 3% or the CPI. So that when we have high inflation years with increase in costs, that the fee schedule adjusts accordingly.
So how do I read this chart? So for example, let's take a look at the pool. Let's take a look at the pool. So it's tier 2 community staff and scouts. And it's $66.65. That's what it will be for this year, right? Or are you saying that's what it is now and we're going to increase it by, I'm trying to understand what am I looking at here?
Yeah, so the agenda item, this would go into place July 1.
July 1 of this year.
Yeah, so you'll see
And
that on
so
the,
what is this?
But that's the current one, and go down, and there's the new one right below it.
so you'll see the first schedule that's attached.
side, so I have to
Right,
I have to do the
right.
math.
So we
We
went
have
from
to-
66 to what?
So you're talking about a small pool? What are you talking about?
Which one's 66
Large
currently?
pool.
What?
Large pool. is
Okay,
66.
so the large pool is $66 and change, and now it's going to $74.
Right, because tier 1 and tier 2 increased at 8%, tier 3 and tier 4 were adjusted to average market rate.
So
So you're gonna see some of these fees
So tier 2, which is community, staff, and scouts, went up how much, will be going up how much in next year?
We would go up 8%.
8%.
And that's still mid-range of the Ventura school
So
districts?
tier 1 and tier 2, which really support those that are closest to us, only went up at 8%. It was hard to do a comparable study of those tiers, because those are unique to respective school districts.
Right.
We looked at nonprofit and commercial rates when we did the study,
Right.
and that's where you see tier 3 and tier 4. You'll see some rates relatively unchanged because we were higher than the market value. You'll see rates that changed rather substantially because that means we were much lower than the market
What's an example of a tier 3 rate that did not go up?
value. Good question.
We've got them both here.
I know, but it's not laid out
I
in
know,
any way
I
that I
know.
can tell.
You're right, so. Classroom looks the same.
Yeah, point out.
The first item is a classroom, it looks the same.
So tier, a nonprofit that went up, you should see like a high school gym.
And so where does like AYBA, agree basketball, are they a tier 2 community staff and scouts, or are they a tier 3 nonprofit?
AYBA would be a tier 3, but with any long-term use agreement, such as AYBA or others, factoring in the actual hours and the actual rates are informed by the facility use schedule, but also the other elements that are involved, such as maintenance.
Yes, I mean, I think at one time AYBA did a new gym floor at Lindero for us, so there are times we've done,
AYBA has made significant donations in the past.
yeah.
So,
Okay, so, and then these prices I'm looking at here, are these priced, like, let's take the pool for example, $74.14 per hour?
Yeah, you'll see at the top of the schedule, top left, all prices are hourly.
so for example, AYBA, do you do a separate lease with them?
We have a long-term lease agreement with AYBA right now.
Okay.
And then custodial is on top of this. yes.
Custodial is on top of this, yes.
Are we
So depending
increasing-
on the time, you have to, right.
And are we increasing the custodial rate we used to charge as well?
Custodial rates were increased, I believe, at 8%. So they were in line with the market.
Okay, so it's 8% bump for, they're getting 8% of both are going 8%, okay.
Correct.
I guess my question would be philosophically or whatever, or, you know, how we culturally think about it. Like I understand the need to make sure that our facilities that are being used for not our core mission, which is enriching and educating children, should be floating around, should be looked at and supported and looked at. How do we make sure we're not underrate and so on and so forth. I guess I feel like for our facilities that are being used by children, for whatever purpose it might be, whether it's Agora Pony Baseball, AYBA, softball, girls volleyball, the club sports, that our community taxpayers have funded those through their bond measures and other things. And I feel like our goal should be to keep that as low as possible, because otherwise we're just passing a direct tax on to our parents. Because the prices are just gonna be pushed onto them and increasing fees for the parents. So when it's for kids, whether it's sports or dance or theater or whatever it might be that we're enriching them, I feel like those should all be in tier 2.
I think parents and families have to pay for the events and activities their kids do, whatever that's included. And that can be, the things that happen at our schools are very low cost. I mean,
I'm not saying no parents.
but I'm just saying, my kids, played ice hockey where, ice costs $4.50 an hour, divide that out. So, it's not our mission, and we have to, there's so much, there's, utility costs, there's wear and tear. We did a deep dive on that a few years ago. I mean, they do get a break, except for the commercial rate, right?
Well, the other thing that, Mr. Lawrence, when we were looking at this, we like Dr. Gleason said, he did a lot of research looking at other districts. We don't want to price ourselves out, we don't want to be exorbitant in our fees. We have to charge something, and we're right in the middle of it. We're not on the lowest, we're not on the highest, and so for me, I felt comfortable with that.
But I don't say it as a tax. I don't believe bond measures are passed for our schools to be used for things outside our core mission, which is to educate and do relative
And all
activities with kids.
All districts charge,
Yes.
so.
I'm not advocating it be free, what I'm
Okay.
saying is, I look at this chart and I feel like the baseline for pricing shouldn't be, are you a Boy Scout, and therefore you get a different pricing perspective than AYBA. If those are both core programs that are helping children grow and mature and become better individuals, that is part of our mission, AYBA, baseball, all the other sports, theater, I feel like if it's for our kids in our community, if it's JAX is gonna be tier 3 nonprofit.
They're not, are they
They're
nonprofit?
nonprofit. But it's,
Well, then they get the nonprofit rate. I mean,
but it's for all of our kids, I'm just saying, like,
Well,
but it's not run by us, we're renting it out.
we don't run the scouts.
I would not in a million years be on board with that.
I asked this question in finance, how do you differentiate tier 2 and tier 3?
Right.
But sometimes it's not that clear.
yeah, what's the criteria you use?
So it's, because I agree, there are some nonprofits that really are more for their kids, like a Boy Scout. So I
Yeah.
don't think it is always that clear. And maybe they should be renamed a little.
But the ones that are gonna hit the hardest are
Maybe it should
our
just be
sports.
community. But
Right, it's the sports leagues that are gonna be hit the hardest, that will be directly passed on to the parents.
Well, we're
So- So can you explain the criteria? So when you like looking at tier 2 and it says staff and scouts, what was the criteria used to move scouts into that?
I don't know what.
That was
Scouts
historical. That's
started.
historical. That was before, that predates, that's from your time on the board before,
Before my time.
oh, then it's
And I think
before your
scouts should
time.
be there, because it's
Right.
Then you could
directly
move scouts,
fostering kids.
you could move scouts to 3, but I wouldn't move 3 to 2. That's where I would stand on this.
I would just say, I appreciate the dialogue, we talk about this in finance and facilities as well. It's a tricky position, because you're right.
What is an example of community?
It would be like a small, does not have a nonprofit status per se, but really is a community-based, small, like a cross-country.
like the theater group for kids, I don't think they're not-for-profit.
They're not probably a Jack's number, but
But there may be some, there used to be, I'm trying to remember when my kids did, some that they do make a
Be
profit.
staff-affiliated community.
Yes,
Right.
yes, I think,
Well,
you don't have many things that fall under 2, do you?
No, and tier 2, as part of that circle of viewpoints is, if we're not, folks can be serving kids well and also making money.
Yeah.
And making money off of our facilities in ways that are also depreciating our facilities
Yes.
at a rate that can put them into a position of having early end of life and a cost to our community that is substantial. And so as we think about our bond projects, that's a very important consideration, that we are seeing some form of a return to reinvest in those facilities to be able to continue to provide them to the public. And I would say if any member of the public looked at this fee schedule, you could say in tier 3 and tier 4s, you could say with confidence, you're going to find places in the county that are higher, you're going to find places in the county that are lower.
Yep.
Or in that we went for the median.
But it just, looking at this, there doesn't appear to be a consistent rhyme or reason for the pricing fluctuation. So it's not the tier 1 to tier 2, the tier 2 to tier 3 difference is not 10% difference. Some, it's 100% difference. Others, it's only 20% difference. So, for example, a high school gym is more than twice the price for tier 3 versus tier 2, but a MPR auditorium is only 25% more.
Does that have to do with the square feet?
It should, because this should be, is it square footage, or, because this was by hours, I'm trying to figure out like what.
Well, right, but I'm talking about a larger room versus a smaller room.
It's
It's
both.
based off the proportionality of the past.
Right.
You know, so there was a rhyme and reason to where things were, and the rhyme and reason to where things are going is to try and average out comparable facilities across the county.
I'm just saying, if you look at a high school gym, which is what the kids play in basketball,
Right.
on an 8-person team, it's almost like $6 per parent per game more difference between tier 2 and tier 3 for an hour game.
Sure, and so what you're gonna see there is the difference between an AYBA versus our high school coach providing a summer clinic
Yes.
to our kids.
Yes.
That's
That's the difference.
substantial, you know.
And the high school coach who's providing a summer clinic gets a better price than the AYBA
Yeah,
does.
staff.
Sad.
He's staff.
He's running a for-profit clinic, right, that he makes money off of.
Nonprofit.
The coach's private
Yes.
clinic
Yes.
that he charges
Yes,
X amount of dollars for,
Yes. yes,
that we get a lot of emails about.
Yeah, there's a
yes.
booster.
Yes, we have rules about that.
And that individual gets a rate better than
Yes,
the nonprofit AYBA or AYSO or the other groups?
Yeah, and to your point about values, you know, you're serving students actively in our athletic programs
Yes.
that help us stay competitive, help us attract enrollment.
All those kids, for the most part, came through the feeder program of AYBA and AYSO that
I
came out.
don't disagree with your logic.
I mean, I go back to the simplest explanation to me is all districts do this, and we want to be in line with our fees, and they're in line.
I guess I'm not disagreeing with the four, I'm just saying, I think you should have a tier for, is this a program that is for kids? If it's for kids, it should be in a different price structure, because that is the core mission of our school district, is to.
well, almost anything you want to do at a school is going to have kids involved. I mean, why don't you just like
But all the other
charge it or
districts,
nothing? I mean,
There's
that's just
there's
craziness.
nonprofit, we have churches and
Yeah,
Right.
sometimes come in who wouldn't.
You have those guys playing soccer, like, I put all this in a different bucket, I'm just saying, like,
other districts don't, I wouldn't either. It's we charge what we charge, and we're not making money on it. Let's talk about that too, right? We don't
no,
break
in
even.
some cases, we're still,
The
yeah,
use of this, when you did the analysis,
the wear
am I
and tear.
correct? We
yes.
were losing money on all
Yeah,
this?
energy
It's
costs.
all
everything.
a matter of perspective, right?
Right.
So it's about the depreciation of our facilities. So when we put world-class facilities in like turf fields at Calabasas, and we are one of the only fields in town, the use is 7 days a week and 12 hours a day.
They don't get a break.
And then what we find is that we have a turf field end of life 6 years prior to where it should be.
Yes.
It needs to be
Yes.
refilled at the expense of, 7 figures to the general fund. So while I do totally understand the perspective of this is all for a community, our core mission in terms of serving students is dramatically impacted by having these significant deferred maintenance costs without a committed appropriation to keeping them moving forward.
so if this were in place a year ago, we would have raised the prices 10% this year.
What do you mean this wasn't?
Can you say a second?
If this approach had been in place 2 years ago, because you're tagging it to the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which
Sure.
went up 10, what is it, last 12 months, I forget what it is, but it's over 10%. This one time, 1 year would have gone up 8% of these organizations.
It went up 8% on tier 1 and tier 2.
But what I'm saying is, in theory, if.
Oh, for next year.
Yeah, if the trend line is continuing and we're here, they could be looking at an 8% increase every time there's a.
Yeah, because, and here's our thought, is we have to pay our folks that maintain it.
Our costs go up that.
8% more. We have insurance, that's gonna go up 8%. We're going to have, all indirect is going to go up 8%. So if we don't,
Then we're
the hard-
absorbing costs and we just can't, we're not in the position to do that. I mean, it's YSL, it's $20. Their costs have gone up. Everybody's getting, you have to
And this-
cover your expenses.
And like I said, I bring us back to, this is what school districts do. They all have fee schedules to rent these out. So they're renting out also
And
to,
increasing them.
to basketball leagues and all kinds of, organizations as well.
And I get the need to support organizations that have core missions in supporting children. The challenge is when that burden is entirely placed on LBSD, it impacts our ability to use our resources to support children to its fullest extent, and that's the rub. It's a partnership. It's working together. It's finding the median. It's raising responsibly, and having a good logic model. We're not trying to profit. We're not a profit-centered organization.
No.
We are trying to keep pace with the cost of services and depreciation.
And there's the whole support system. There's Facilitron, there's people monitoring Facilitron and making sure the staffing is there and making sure the custodian is there at night. So there's the whole, it's a
There's a
layer.
whole huge infrastructure of
Right.
facilities that has to be.
Well, and I understand your concern, Mr. Lawrence, but also we are once again a uniquely placed district in that my children play sports on Ventura County campuses.
Yeah.
So all of the tax dollars that I paid to support Las Virgenes, the wear and tear fell on Ventura County schools. And so, and I think it could be vice versa. Some of our taxpayers, as, you know, some of the Ventura County taxpayers are playing on our sites.
Yeah.
I appreciate the conversation. I would just say, I don't feel comfortable with LVUSD student-dominant organizations being priced at a bucket that is not with any nonprofit gets the same rate as AYBWA, ASO, and these groups. That just feels wrong to me. These are groups specifically chartered to focus on the overwhelming majority of kids in our community that provides social, emotional well-being, growth for them, as we've seen. I think 1 in 4 of our high school kids play a sport. It's obviously the feeder program for those, and that we're charging the same price as Joe and Susie's nonprofit seems off. So I appreciate the conversation. I won't be supporting this up, I'll be voting no for it, but I would hope in the future there could be a way to figure out a way to take those groups that are chartered specifically to focus on kids in our community, to give them a pricing tier, especially after the community just voted a $300 million tax on themselves for these facilities.
That they do good work and help kids does not in any way delineate that they come with costs and expenses that we cannot take more than
I
our
think some of
share.
those groups will fall into the tier 2.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not
I just can't
clear,
tell that.
maybe the definition needs to be worked on more, because some of the groups that do focus on our kids will fall into tier 2. So I think that just needs to be ironed out somehow a little more.
And the board does have a mechanism for approving rates from any of the organizations that you suggested through the long-term facility use agreement, which is informed by but not bound to
Right.
this schedule.
Thank you for the
So,
conversation.
I'm going to call for the vote in a second, but Dr. Gleason, as you flush this out and move this forward, can you provide the board with some information on who would be in, which groups would be in the tier 2?
We'll get back later.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, I'm going to call for the vote. Student, do you support this fee schedule?
Yeah.
Okay. Board, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
How about that?
Okay, thank you. Passes 4-1. And with that, we're going to move on to consent B. May I have a motion to approve consent B?
So moved.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
This is a board vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes 5-0. Next, we're on to the interim budget report. Dr. Stepanowski.
Dr. Gleason.
Keep turning on the mic, thinking. Madam President, members of the board, going to welcome up our amazing Director of Accounting and Finance, Ms. Brenda Cho. This is our second interim budget report in all the forms of it. The second we worked on together, Brenda and myself, as well as the second of the year. This is an update from our first interim, helps share how the original projections are manifesting against this year's budget and constraints. And I'm going to provide an overall context of our current state budget and challenges, and then Ms. Cho is going to get into our multi-year projections. So in contrast to the past 3 years, we are seeing anticipated revenues on the decline. Right now, there's about a budget gap of about $22.5 billion, and even just a couple months after the governor releases the January budget, there are spending solutions that the Legislative Analyst's Office are suggesting that are even more prudent from where the governor was. What's interesting is that this new budget and of course, you know, it's all back and forth and going through the important political process between now and June. There's a commitment at both the committee chair level and the governor level to maintain one-time funded programs. So universal TK is being protected, universal meals, which was a surprise given the windfall, the transportation reimbursement, which we talked about in the prior board meeting, and then the expanded learning opportunities program that is delineated for supporting students who are low-income foster youth, English learners with additional instruction. So all that to say, who's right? Is it the governor? Is it the legislative analyst office? What we do know is that we are in Great Recession type levels of tax collections in a time where, but we're in a different time because there are three protections in the current budget. So the first is a lot of the one-time funding that was used to close the gap for Prop 98 in the past, that Prop 98 guarantee, is going away, and that's positive because that creates a cushion for LCFF, the ongoing LCFF to grow. Attendance changes, so given that 500,000 students have left the state of California and that Prop 98 is the floor, the state has the ability to provide higher per pupil funding, we'll get to that more, but has to also reconcile the dramatic impact of declining enrollment in districts, and we are not removed from that. And then there is a significant amount of reserves, and everyone from the LAO to the governor seems to be of the mind that next year and the year after will be potentially more problematic. We are in for some bumpy times, at least of 25, 26, and in that we should save the reserves already. Current COLA estimate is about 8.1%. And the thought is that might go up in the final quarter, but the fundable COLA that the LAO is projecting right now is about 6.4%. So right now we have a challenge of a cost of living adjustment that might not be fully funded at the state level. And one of the biggest challenges that we face right now is that all places with extensive rain and snow and precipitation in California do not need to file their taxes until October 16th. And the governor's budget is due in June. So you have a year with typical tax revenues and an unpredictable revenues as it relates to funding the COLA, and you also don't have your tax revenues fully on the books until months after the budget has to be adopted.
That has created a hot mess. When June is hard enough anyway,
Yeah.
and because of some rain, I have a son who's a CPA, he hates this.
Yeah.
But he's like, now we don't know. But yeah, now we don't know what our revenues are. It's already a crazy game, wait until June.
And
Now
I
we
just,
till
this is,
October.
yeah,
well, and
because of
all
some rain
signs.
and the snow. I mean, honestly, if he's so concerned about the snow, he could go get those people out of their houses up at Big Bear. How many people have passed away already?
All signs point to probably need to be err on the side of conservative in the May revise and also in the adopted budget, which in an uncertain year,
Yeah.
we want precision and not guesswork. Other requirements, everyone loves a good LCAP. And it looks like the LCAP requirements are going to become even more extensive. So as Ms. Falk shared tonight, if let's say Las Virgenes down the road has subgroups of students who are not performing at par with all students, there will be a broader requirement to put a plan in place for the LCAP. And we're seeing a shift, maybe a little bit back to NCLB levels of accountability, no child left behind. There are school facilities bond bills, which is perfect timing. Let's hope those move forward. That will really help the match of the capital improvement projects that are coming through the bond. And then there is a highly unlikely.
I had a question on the bond funds that they're moving through. I was trying to look them up. Are they going to be needs-based? Are they going to be tagged? Are they going to weight the districts on that, or is it first come, first served?
I don't have the trailer language to know, but that's something we can monitor, keep you updated.
I thought they were like one of each.
I think
Well, one's inclusive of
Right.
higher ed, one's
Right.
higher ed,
But the one that's specifically for K-12, this is one where if it isn't baked yet, we should try to be engaging with our legislators on it, because when they need-based tag these things, we get screwed.
I think that dialogue, important advocacy across the board. Any advocacy we can do for facilities, state facilities bonds, especially given right now it's a 4-year wait after you apply for it. So we're gonna have projects in the hopper that will wait 4 years to see if we can get reimbursement funds.
Well, you just received a reimbursement of the green light on the multipurpose room at White Oak, right? From when was?
1999.
Right.
We submitted the application, several
Yeah,
years
well,
ago.
how much did we get back? You can laugh, but how much, what?
3.4 million.
Yeah, yeah.
So one interesting idea that's out there is to no longer fund students based on attendance, but to fund them on enrollment. Because we built budgets on enrollment, we're funded on attendance. And one school of thought right now, I'm not saying I agree or disagree, I'm just sharing the weather, is that students right now have a complexity of reasons for not coming to school, and to force the issue, according to Senator Portantino, disincentivizes some of the more complex things that happen.
That's obscene.
Do you think that would fly?
All ThinkNet, as school services, everyone asks, think that has very little chance.
Yeah.
Senator Portantino is a very, powerful, legislator, but there's too many variables, and I'm not sure, in all honesty, if that is a win for us or not. So.
Senator Portantino was the one who authored Late Start, middle school Late Start.
Well, he's back 1,000.
Moving on, pension cost increases. So in the first interim versus the second interim, because of economic conditions, we're seeing about an $800,000 increase on our PERS contributions, so that's going to affect the multi-year projections. But the biggest items, and Ms. Falk did an amazing job outlining this, so I will give you the cliff notes and you can go through the extended cut should you want, is attendance and enrollment matter. And they matter for our overall bottom line. It's not about money for money's sake, it's about money for being able to serve our kids and all of our programs through the ways in which we budget. So Ms. Falk and her team are working hard to really make a dent in ADA, which has dropped a couple percent since pre-COVID. And a couple percent, as I think Ms. Couple shared earlier tonight, is several $1 million. So,
Can we go back to the pension one? I meant to ask this. I know for the last at least 9 years that I've been on the board, the state's been significantly, steadily moving its pension over to us, but I thought we were reaching a point where they were done with the shift.
on stairs.
So PERS, they're still shifting additional, and is there ever going to be an end in sight for that?
Hers, I believe the shift is really based on market conditions, so it's not gonna be this, right now, there's not that, remember there was a giant
Yep,
step
yep.
over time? This is more where interest rates in the economy are, that fund position will be passed off to us. And so better economic times,
Better numbers? Okay.
So our enrollment versus ADA trends are really interesting. So, when Ms. Kimball was here over the last couple of years, our enrollments, our attendance, which is what we're funded on, was actually higher than our enrollment, which never happens because it was frozen post-COVID. The goal was, don't incentivize kids to send, or don't incentivize district to send kids with COVID to school before we had all these protections in place. But now that gap is growing, and Karen Kimball sat in this chair last year, and with her best guess, and I think it was a very great guess, had us sitting at 92-38 in terms of ADA. But the ADA, the attendance decline that was aforementioned, for this year's second interim, we're bringing in $1 million less from what she projected, not because she wasn't a great projector, but because of this phenomenon. We're down 2% pre-COVID. LA County as a whole is down 6%. So this is when I go to a FICMAT workshop at state level, every CBO is talking about this phenomenon. And so the one the thing we need to think about is that this is probably the most important slide in this preamble to the multi-year projections, is that we're now funded on, in an effort to protect districts from having a draconian cut to the budget in a single year, we now receive ADA based on the higher of the current year, the former year, or the average of 3 years. So the blue line on this graph represents where we really are. The orange line represents what we're funded. And so there's ghosts funded across the state. And the state can afford to fund ghosts because 550,000 students left. But any change in our enrollment, I say this to say, any change in our enrollment this year that is not a dramatic spike from this year's or prior years will benefit us 3, 4, and 5 years out. So we have to think about, when we think about enrollment strategy, we have to think about it on a 5-year trajectory. The changes we make now will not really be felt entirely until 3 years.
Is that going to be ongoing for the time being, that 10 years from now, the plan is still have it not be, you have a choice between this year, last year, or the average of 3 years?
That's the new statute for LCFF, yep. This graph kind of illustrates that. So just to orient you, the top, that blue component, has us at our current ADA at 9,750 students.
I'm sorry, just ask so much, because I thought you said if we had an increase, it won't really fill up for 3 years, but if we do have a good increase for 1 year, that actually could benefit us for 2 years, because we could use it for the 1 year this year, and the next year we could use it as the previous year. So it does actually have an immediate potential 2-year impact, right?
Yeah, but that's a great question. So if you look at 22, 23, we'd have to get above 10,166 enrollment. We're at 9,147.
Yeah, that's not happening.
In order to have an enrollment spike that affects us in a single year. But as you see the line going in the direction it is, keep getting our enrollment to 9,750 today as opposed to 9,147 helps shape a better 3-year averaging for 3 years on. And so this is, I do have optimism. So to just bring us back to pre-COVID ADA overnight, Ms. Falk is amazing, and if anyone can do it, it's her.
Yes.
And the world is on her side.
No pressure.
But even if we made a 0.5%
believe in
difference, so a 0.5% difference, it would, if you look at the single year, 23, 24, you're not going to see a substantial change in revenues. But as you look out, you see about $1 million shift in those revenues. So all that to say, ADA matters in the moment. Ms. Falk can get that number up at 0.5%. That will affect our general fund next year. If we can do both, enrollment and attendance, that we are uniquely equipped in Las Virgenes, unlike many districts in the state, because we are a destination district, to put the tools in place to control our fiscal future in these uncertain times. And those are the dynamics we're largely working with the finance committee.
Does the TK just get balanced out because they recognize they're adding a whole new grade, so there's a baseline increase, so it's not just the additional kids don't help us on a 1-to-1 ratio because they realize in theory we've added a percentage, so the ceiling goes up as well, or how does that work?
In terms of the 3-year averaging?
Yeah, so if we had 200 kids in TK, but we added classrooms and teachers for that, does the ceiling also move on us, so it doesn't?
No, good question, but it means we're funding less ghosts, or we have a greater boost to get us over the ghost level.
Right.
And now time for what everyone's been waiting for, the main event, the second interim overview. Of course, we always give these disclaimers. I mean, Ms. Cho and my long history in these chairs, disclaimers are, we're still waiting, of course, the May revise in the final budget. But the economic uncertainty of right now and wondering if COLA is funded, will there be a change to one-time programs? There were questions tonight, will there be equity formulas applied to facilities grants and also the LCFF? Those are all being discussed. Given that uncertainty, what you see tonight is a conservative budget from an enrollment perspective that's also rooted in no change in our ADA from where it is to date. As I shared previously, we're optimistic we're making movement on both those levels, but we want to present the board with a scenario that matches the times, which is to buckle down, be conservative, and provide all the tools we have as we navigate the next couple of years. So Ms. Cho is going to walk us through the exciting world of revenues and expenditures, and then finish with a multi-year projection.
Madam President, members of the board, good evening, and thank you for having me here tonight. As Dr. Gleason mentioned, there are many assumptions and considerations that go into the budget process, and those will continue to change. As we move through the year, we're able to analyze and refine the budget, taking into account...
Ms. Cho, excuse
Is your
me,
mic on?
can you move the mic closer? Thank you.
Taking into account all the changes and expectations thus far. And in the next few slides, we'll review the changes and see how the changes since first interim and how those affect our current year and the projections. So we'll start off looking at revenues. We see an overall increase to revenues of about $525,000. For the current year, we see an increase in the LCFF revenues as the district sees an increase in the unduplicated pupil percentage. And for federal and state revenues are also adjusted with updated estimates and allocations. The most significant change can be seen in state revenues, and that's due to in January the governor's budget proposed a reduction to the arts, music, and instructional material grant to cover the cost of LCFF for current year and for 23-24.
One thing to add to this is that we talk about students leaving the state, and the increase in LCFF revenues is a function of our, we have now 1 in 4 students in Las Virgenes are low-income or foster youth or an English learner. And that's probably because not the number of students has necessarily increased, but the students who've exited did not meet those criteria, and so we see a high proportion. Good news for us in terms of having a more favorable formula for that.
Can you remind me, when did we pass the first interim budget? What month was that?
December.
December, okay.
This is just a comparison of the changes in expenditures from first interim to second. The salaries and benefits show an increase as the district fills those long unfilled vacancies. But the most significant increases we can see in services and other operating expenditures, which we will review in the next slide. So we see increases to our budget for special education costs, specifically in the non-public school placements. Previously, the district benefited from the SELPA pool of funding. However, as we see many changes from the state, this being one of them, has been funding shifted from the SELPA level to the district level. As a result, we see a greater impact to the expenditures on our budget for mental health services provided. Other notable areas of increase are the scanning project and the security services through Covered 6. Also utility costs, as a community may feel the impact of the increases, we feel those here as well. Other increases are seen in legal fees, softwares, increased support from our accounting firm, maintenance service, and K-9 services as well.
Since we're looking at revenues and expenditures in isolation, as just to underscore something Ms. Cho had just shared, which is the special education costs used to be SELPA funded. The money used to go directly to the SELPA. The revenues that are coming in to offset that will be seen on the revenue side as they come in according to the appropriation schedule. But we did benefit from having SELPA level services that now the district has to pick up in isolation, and we didn't really have much of a choice in that in terms of how the budget was structured.
I had a question on some of the services. Some of the things noted here we knew about before December, but we still are off the biggest hit here. So like, I think, when did we hire Covered 6? But the election costs, the bond consulting, all that was incurred. Is it, we voted on it in December, but we put it to bed months before, and that's why it wasn't in that process?
Yeah, so in the first interim, it's our most imprecise budget because not all expenditures are hitting. Some are under categorical programs, others we don't have the full accurate amount encumbered. Ms. Cho, what might you add to that?
Yeah, I think in addition to what Dr. Gleason is saying, is also a timing issue of when we're looking at the budget. It's a snapshot in time, and a lot of things may have occurred, a lot of shifts, intentions of planning changed within the time of when we took that snapshot and when we're projecting out the first interim.
Because we're off by like 25% on services, is that kind of like the junk drawer? It's like, that's where all the stuff we don't know about usually goes into typically when we look at something like this, so that's why, whereas like salaries, we kind of are gonna be pretty close, because we know where that's set and that's gonna move, but is that where we should, I just don't remember seeing a variance that big in one line item before.
Yeah, no, it's a very important question. So keep in mind, a lot of those are hitting categoricals too. They're not hitting unrestricted gen fund. They're just being reported in an object code.
Okay.
We had to make some decisions this year. We have, let's take security through covered 6. Our hope still is that will be covered through the Prop 56 grant. So even though it's hitting as an expenditure that was not originally budgeted by our predecessors, it still will have a revenue line that we see come in to offset it. When we talk about scanning, we had to make a conscious decision through the finance committee. So originally we were talking about doing this over 5 years. And that would have, but then the cost of waiting, the cost of storage, the cost of services increasing didn't make sense. We saw increased substance use that we were aware of, so canine services, we thought it was important that kids, that increased. We couldn't predict the natural gas cost increases that we've all felt hit our pocketbook. And most substantially illegal from PRA requests and others, student discipline as we get back used to COVID, and then such a strong special ed program and serve our families and students well. And those high-tier placements have a cost that was initially pooled, and we couldn't have predicted that. It was not predicted when the original budget was adopted. So to your question, yes, a little bit, but less likely in the future as one-time categoricals go away. And these are anomalous. We're not going to have a scanning project again. The special education shift is not a common occurrence.
Thank you.
This chart just shows the overall changes within first interim to second interim. We see with the increase in expenditures, we see an increase in expenditures, which in turn decreases our ending fund balances due to the changes just discussed. And with these changes, we see an operating surplus of $5.5 million for the fiscal year and an ending balance fund of $46.8 million. When we go to the next slide, it's similar to what we just saw, but it just adds the 2 subsequent years. We see an ending fund balance decline the next 2 years out as revenues are projected lower. In these scenarios, revenues are based on enrollment declining 1.75%, also recognizing less revenues that were one-time funded in nature. And the expenditures in the 2 subsequent years are also adjusted for proposed staff reductions, the step and column increases, as well as the rising pension costs. Supplies are adjusted downward in the following year with the idea that those one-time funded expenditures will not continue in their nature. And so given these changes, we see that we still meet the reserve requirement, minimum of 3% without dipping into Fund 17.
Without digging into, 17,
Yes.
which is what exactly?
Fund 17 was set up so that the district meets the 10% stake reserve cap on their reserves, as well as to mitigate any revenue shortfalls or unanticipated expenditures. With the absence of the transfer to Fund 17, we would be not meeting that requirement because we would be above the 10%.
We can think of it as a committed extension of the reserve. I think the next item is authorizing the actual transfer to Fund 17. The board passed a resolution, I believe last April, to commit those funds to get us under the 10% reserve requirement. Big takeaway from this slide is even with that transfer, after the whole dynamics of this year, we're still meeting that 3% requirement. We have a surplus this year. You don't hear the S word very often in a second interim presentation. That said, there's still a structural deficit in place, which is why we will have to ask the board for your support in adopting the resolution to afford us the ability to make cuts as necessary to continue to meet that reserve requirement after this.
I just had a couple questions, and this is more of me just learning this new format than the one I got used to in my brain. When I see ending fund balance, the way it's used here, is this meaning at the end of the year when all expenses are accounted for, we have 46 million in unspent funds that then carry over to next year? Or does it mean that there's a chunk of this being held for something else?
Yeah, so the ending fund balance is accounting for all the revenues that come in, all the expenditures, all the transfers in and out of Fund 1, and that ending balance is what would be available. The portion of that is committed to certain areas that you'll see in the non-spendable, restricted, committed. But essentially, yes, that 46 million is what would be remaining after all the revenues and expenditures hit.
And then add all the lines between below.
They don't add up to 46, that's why I added to 32. So I was trying to figure out where the 14 million is.
The 14 million is Fund 17.
So where is that
At the
on
way,
here?
the last line.
Very bottom.
Keep going, last line.
Oh, it carries over another sheet.
Right.
This is just really hard to read. Like you would think like that'd be, I thought these
Okay,
were.
you should have the sheet, I apologize, I didn't see that on
I don't see that on
You mean another slide?
Yeah.
Make your slide smaller. No, not 100%, not 125%.
It's 90%.
It's
Okay.
on the same slide, it's just at the bottom.
It's a different, yeah. Okay, so
No,
I'm looking at this, so it just looks different than mine, I guess, for some reason. I have, I'm reading here, adding this, that's fine. So that's where those funds come from. So what is the difference between unassigned, unappropriated amount and so you have restricted, which I understand, are funds that we can't touch, that have to sit in the bucket for all different state reasons, we must keep where they're at. You have committed, which are funds that we know we're gonna spend in out years that we haven't, or is that?
the committed funds to support our fund balance, are committed to transfer for deferred maintenance.
Yeah.
They're committed to support vacation day accrual for classified staff.
So is really at the end of the day, the funds that are, if you're rebalancing a checkbook, the number is 8 million that we really have in like real world reserves, not 46 million.
22 million.
What are you
Think of
adding?
Fund 17 as an extension of your reserve. So in order to get to below 10%, remember, that's a new state requirement with the passage of the
Correct,
last.
that's what I'm trying to get my head around, is what numbers are getting us to
So
that.
you have to, the board committed to Fund 17 to use that 14 million to support ongoing efforts, right? And so that allows for us to carry on an extension of the reserve while meeting that 10% requirement. But you can think of $22 million unassigned.
Okay, and I'm assuming all the triggers are off the table then for us having to spend our reserves, given because the state hasn't hit its numbers and the economy's going in a different direction.
No, the 10% reserve cap is still in place until another budget act is passed.
yeah.
So it was a double trigger, right? So did both triggers get pulled this year for that 10% to go into effect?
Are you talking about the Prop 98 triggers?
Yeah,
Correct.
no, they,
So this was a different, this was a Senate bill, it's in the executive summary, there was
Yeah.
a piece of legislation that forced us to get below
Yeah.
10% reserve.
Okay.
this is not the Prop 98,
You're right.
Correct, it's not I definitely understand
Right.
the question. We won't know the Prop 98 triggers for this next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this was all mentioned before, but this just outlines the factors that went into the projections. As you know, the 2.3 million from our Measure E parcel tax has been consistent throughout the years. The state contribution to fund the COLA at 8.1%. Hopefully, we will get finalized percentage in June when the budget passes. And again, this was a conservative approach, especially in terms of enrollment. We are in a space where we're able to attract more students and improve our LCFF revenues. Also, the impact of one-time funding programs at the state level. With the exhaustion of those programs, we see the impact in the multi-year projection as some have shifted to the general fund or some have been eliminated as they're one-time in nature. And again, with the fluctuations to PERS and STIRS, especially in the increase where within 4 or 5 years out, we see a 5% increase in PERS has really affected our projections. And included in the committed, we do budget for those increases as well.
Bottom line, just to tie it up, we're fortunate for, and this is not a single year effort, of course, it's a multi-year effort of the board in helping maintain good fiscal prudence, ensuring that we have reserves to weather the time that we have ahead, and we have conservative projections with optimistic strategies moving forward with ADA enrollment, and you are seeing us be able to certify or recommend to the board to certify that we can meet 3% even with the transfer of the committed funds to Fund 17. And with that, here's a schedule of upcoming play dates with respect to Finance Committee and budget workshops. Of course, this year is unique. We usually wait for that May revise and the June adopted budget, but we have an October tax filing deadline. So last year was unique too. We'll see how that plays out.
No year will ever be the same.
Yes.
Just keep showing your toes.
I can't wait to say it'll be normal.
Thank you, and thanks to your staff. And thanks to Ms. Cho for coming and being here. I appreciate the way this is laid out. The clarity of this is great.
Are there any other questions?
I'll make a motion to approve second interim budget.
Okay,
Second.
terrific. And before I call for the vote, I want to thank Ms. Cho as well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the support that you give. It's interesting. This is not constant. Change is the only constant we have with the budget. And Dr. Gleason, thank you.
There's a reason why the Chinese say, may you live in interesting times, the curse. So, may you live in interesting times.
But thank you for your brilliance on all of this, and then we have a lot to watch for coming up. So we have a motion and a second, and with that, student, do you support and favor the vote for the second interim budget? Whatever I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Board, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes, thank you very much. Now we go on to the affirming intent to meet our requirements. I can say it.
Sorry.
Dr. Stepp.
I can't think of a better way to spend your 40th birthday than second interns and budget efficiencies and transfers between Fund 17. Dr. Gleason.
Yeah, lean into that mic.
It'll start working eventually.
Being reflected right now.
Like twice.
You advanced to the bonus round.
Madam President, members of the board, as has been shared in the previous agenda item, district's fiscal position is strong. That said, even though the reserve seems like a substantial amount of money, it does reflect relatively 1 month payroll and expenses. And with uncertain times, we need to meet the requirements of the LA County Office of Education and our auditor to certify that there is a structural deficit, and that in this case, there's a structural deficit. We have no reason to believe we will not meet that 3%, but if you check either box, you should have this resolution in your pocket for when the auditor comes back.
Motion to approve, this is straightforward.
Thank you, may I have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Student, do you approve of this affirming intent?
Yes.
Board, all those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Next is the transfer of funds to Fund 17.
Does anybody else work here?
We're just watching, man.
They promised me for my birthday, so. Madam President, members of the board, again, this is a
Straightforward.
follow-up to.
Oh, we can finish.
Okay, I'm happy to say. As a follow-up to our second interim, Fund 17 was established by the board via Resolution 3121 last spring to allow us to commit a portion of our reserve necessary to meet the 10% requirement under Senate Bill 751. Whenever we transfer money between funds, we need board authorization in order to execute that transfer at the county office level. It's important to note as you execute this transfer that since this is an extension of our reserve as we navigate preparing a budget, as we navigate upcoming negotiations, likely that we will see future, in our near future potentially, items to transfer back into the general fund. And again, this is just a new paradigm of navigating the extension of our reserve.
I move we approve Resolution 2722, transfer from Fund 1 to Fund 17.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank
I have a question before we go.
you. Okay.
I'm just curious in light of what we're seeing in the world today, where does our $14 million sit? Is it sitting in a bank somewhere or?
It sits in the county treasury.
And where is the county treasury money sitting? I think,
The same invisible place all of them sits.
Yeah.
okay, so it's not sitting in a bank. It's sitting in like,
It is accruing small amounts of interest like you would in a bank. yes.
but it's not in a, I'm thinking more along, banks that are closing, things that we're seeing. We don't have any exposure when we move money to stuff. It doesn't go into, it's not going into private banks or the public banking system.
No, we have no other choice than to keep it in the treasury.
Yes,
And,
that's right.
yeah, yes, we're as protected as any LA county.
Yeah,
Oh boy.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call for the vote. Student, are you in favor of transferring funds to Fund 17?
Yes.
Board, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Now we need to open a public hearing.
Motion to open the public hearing.
I'll second.
Okay, would somebody like to introduce the item, please? Whose item is this?
Oh, I thought we talked about the next item.
Dr. Cyphers.
Dr. Cyphers, would you like to tell us what we're...
How we spend the money, Dr. Sanders.
Madam President, members of the board, as part of the collective bargaining process, we encourage an inclusive approach that invites public comment on the contract proposals between the association and the district. This is the first step in the negotiations process each year. But before you see, the district and LBA have agreed to present initial proposals in a joint format for the board and public to review.
Terrific. And we have a motion and a second to open the hearing. May I have a vote to open the hearing? And this is a board vote only. All those in favor of opening the hearing?
Aye.
Okay, so this is an opportunity for the public to speak on our openers, and hearing none, I'm going to call for a motion to close the hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, board only, of closing the hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes 5-0. Next is the presentation of the joint initial openers. Dr. Stepp.
Dr. Sanders.
Madam President, members of the board, submitting for your review the aforementioned joint reopeners as explained during the public hearing.
I might remember, we usually have to do that 4 times. Is that because they're not joint? Because we have a reopener for LDCA and LBEA, we have to open and close?
That's absolutely correct. With the LVEA, LVCA, LVCA will come your way on the 20th.
Okay, so we're not doing it. Right.
Okay, any questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the joint initial reopeners?
So moved.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Terrific. This is a board vote only. All those in favor of opening the initial reopeners?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. And with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.